something is happening that Vladimir Putin tried hard to prevent. The war he started in Ukraine can no longer be ignored, even at home. People in various parts of Russia are standing in long lines at gas stations. Uncertainty is growing, and no one is sure if they'll have anything to fill up with. Fuel is completely unavailable in some areas and sold in limited amounts elsewhere. But Putin has bigger concerns. Russia's war budget is also taking a hard hit as it depends on oil and gas exports. It's already starting to feel the losses caused by attacks on refineries and pipelines. Experts are talking about losses in the billions, which could significantly weaken Moscow's ability to finance the war in the coming months. But before we get to these impacts, let's first take a direct look at the front, where the situation is also dramatic. We'll start at Pokrovsk and Dobropillia, where Russia opened one of the most dangerous directions of its summer offensive in August. Welcome to Beyond the Borders, where we uncover hidden connections, power plays, and conflicts that shape our world. Pokrovsk and Dobropillia. A few weeks ago, news emerged that concerned Ukraine's supporters more than anything in recent months. Russian troops broke through in the Dobropillia sector, and in 3 days advanced by 10 to 17 kilometers, a pace we last saw at the beginning of the war. Ukrainian officials warned the situation is dire, with a risk of the entire defensive line near Pokrovsk collapsing. As Kiev says, over 110,000 Russian troops have gathered there. 132nd units also joined. Motorized Rifle Brigade and 5th Guards, Tank Brigade tasked with clearing the way westward. Although it seemed like a major breakthrough at first glance, analysts pointed out that it was more a tactic of infiltration than a massive attack. Small groups tried to push deeper into Ukrainian positions using artillery and drone cover. However, Ukraine responded quickly. Elite forces, including the Azov Regiment and Da Vinci's Wolves Battalion, were sent to the front. Together with other units, they launched a series of counterattacks that slowed the Russian onslaught and created space to stabilize the line. As a result, Ukraine managed to liberate 6 villages north of Pokrovsk, while the Deep State Project even mentioned 7. It was the first clear sign that the Russian breakthrough was not unlimited, and that the defense could recover. But the front in the Donetsk region changes from day to day. Soon after these reports, Kiev confirmed that 2 villages in the region had again fallen to Russia. And it is from this area that the latest reports are coming. According to the Ukrainian side, some Russian units that advanced too far found themselves trapped and were surrounded in the area near Dobropillia. The exact number of soldiers who may have been surrounded is not yet known, but there is talk of groups that penetrated deep and were cut off from supplies. If confirmed, this would be an unwelcome development for Moscow. The Russian command must choose to attempt a risky rescue of those surrounded or abandon them. Kupiansk and the Russian summer offensive. Kupiansk has been cited for over a year as a main Russian army target in the northern front. The Russians have long dreamed here of an encirclement that would force Ukraine to withdraw its forces from a large part of the Kharkiv region. In mid-August, the pressure appeared to intensify as Moscow sent thousands of soldiers into the area. There is talk of dozens of battalion tactical groups supported by tanks and artillery. Among the deployed forces were also units of the 25th Combined Army, which have experience fighting near Lyman and Svatov. My Russian goal was to reach the Oskil River and then encircle Kupiansk. The Ukrainians countered with defensive actions, deploying the 32nd and 41st to the area. Brigade, which immediately engaged in fighting north of the city. The result did not take long to appear. The Ukrainian army announced it liberated Mirna, a small but strategically important village controlling northern access roads to Kupiansk. This move disrupted the Russian plan and showed that the same logic applies here as in Pokrovsk. Russia may advance, but it comes with heavy losses and no assurance of a decisive breakthrough. The Russian summer offensive can be summed up as a slow, exhausting advance. The Russian Ministry of Defense claims to have gained over 3,500 square kilometers and 100 settlements since March, but no major cities have been captured. Analysts such as the Institute for the Study of War report that monthly gains are just hundreds of square kilometers, a small reward compared to the heavy losses. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the Russian command seeks a symbolic victory to promote at home, but hasn't achieved one yet. And while the front near Kupiansk and Pokrovsk remains fiercely contested, in the bigger picture, it's clear that the Russian summer offensive has not met the expectations with which Moscow started it. Ukrainian attacks on refineries, pipelines, and the fuel crisis in Russia. As Ukraine battles for every kilometer on the front line, it has also launched a new front deep within Russian territory. Even more so than the trenches near Pokrovsk or Kupiansk, because it targets a place that is extremely sensitive for Russia. Ukrainian drones are systematically striking Russia's energy sector. Refineries in Krasnodar, Saratov, Syzran, plus key sites near the Black Sea and the Ust-Luga export terminal by the Baltic have been hit. One of the most serious incidents was the attack on the Novoshakhtinsk refinery in Rostov. 21. On August 21, a drone strike caused a massive fire that disabled part of the facility, even with air defenses present. The burning refinery's smoke and flames showed the war is no longer only in Ukraine, but also impacting Russia's own infrastructure. International analysts say that in August, up to 17% of Russian refinery capacity, over 1.1 million barrels per day, was offline. These are numbers that can no longer be ignored. For comparison, this is enough to cover about half of Germany's daily consumption. Ukraine also targeted the heart of Russian oil exports, the Druzhba pipeline. A strike on a pumping station in the Bryansk region caused the flow of oil to Slovakia and Hungary to be interrupted for several days. Europe once again felt that this war is also about energy. Things looked even worse back home in Russia. The outage in the network crippled the supply to refineries and the Ust-Luga terminal, which is crucial for the export of diesel and oil products abroad. Estimates show the terminal will run at half capacity in September, so what's the outcome? A fuel crisis Russia hasn't seen in decades. Gas stations are empty across many areas, from the Far East to the Caucasus and Crimea. The most serious situation is in Crimea, where in August, people waited up to half a day in kilometer-long lines at gas stations to refuel. Elsewhere, gasoline is being rationed, and in some places it's simply not available at all. According to available data, the price of A95 gasoline has increased by more than 50% since the beginning of the year. For ordinary Russians, this is tough. For Putin, it's worse as fuel costs rise for both drivers and the army. The Russian government took emergency measures, a ban on gasoline exports until the end of September, and restrictions on trading fuel on the domestic market. At the same time, Moscow is trying to increase crude oil exports to at least partially compensate for losses at refineries, but it may face further drone strikes as well as growing sanctions pressure. However, the main issue is the budget. Oil and gas provide the Kremlin over a third of its revenue. If suddenly 17% of refining capacity is out of operation and export terminals are operating at half capacity, it means losses of billions every month. August infrastructure damage is estimated at several billion dollars. For a war budget that needs every ruble for tanks, drones, and missiles, this is a blow that cannot be ignored. And there is another dimension. Ukrainian drones show that Russia is not untouchable. Even hundreds of kilometers from the front, depots can explode, refineries burn, and logistics collapse. This psychological impact could match the economic harm. Now, the war is happening within Russia. Kyiv is gaining a tool it lacked before. This isn't just about defending trenches. It's targeting what sustains Moscow on its economy, budget, and war financing. And that's why many analysts say that the drone campaign against refineries and pipelines could ultimately be just as significant as any success on the front lines. We're not done yet. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up to help it reach more people. If you'd like to support my work, you can contribute using the thanks button. Thank you. Let's continue. Russian airstrikes and peace talks. While Ukraine targets its drones at Russian refineries and logistics, Moscow responds with attacks on Ukrainian cities. The summer of 2025 saw the most intense Russian airstrikes since the war began. In recent weeks, Russian missiles and drones have hit Kyiv, Dnipro, Odessa, and other Ukrainian towns and infrastructure. The biggest impact was felt by the power grid. Strikes on power plants and distribution nodes caused widespread power outages. In some regions, outages lasted hours, and in the south, even days. Moscow is making it clear that it wants to break Ukraine not only on the front lines, but also economically and psychologically. Russia wants to show it still has the upper hand in escalation. The Ukrainian command reports Moscow has launched thousands of drones and missiles in recent weeks, some targeting civilians. This signals to Ukraine that the war could become far more costly. But these strikes also have a political dimension. Analysts say the Kremlin aims to increase pressure before possible peace talks. The meaning is clear: to force Kiev to negotiate from a weak position. This view was also confirmed by President Volodymyr Zelensky when he warned that Russia is trying to intensify attacks precisely in order to have a better position in future talks. Ukraine is thus facing double pressure: Russian missiles in the air and diplomatic maneuvers behind the scenes. Moscow aims to break it with systematic bombing, while Kiev knows negotiations require proving it can still defend and strike. That's why today's war isn't just about the front line, but the bigger picture. It's about who appears stronger at the negotiating table. Conclusion: a few weeks ago, Ukraine seemed nearly exhausted. After Pokrovsk, the pressure near Kupiansk was threatening, and in many front areas the defense seemed on the edge. But the events of the last few days show that this war is like a roller coaster. Moscow pressures Ukrainian cities with missiles and drones, while Kiev targets the core of the Russian economy: refineries, pipelines, and fuel supplies. The result is a fuel crisis in Russian regions, kilometer-long lines at gas stations, and billions in losses for the state budget. This sends a clear signal. Despite heavy losses and pressure, Ukraine can still strike Russia hard, at the front and even hundreds of kilometers behind it. And that could be decisive when the time comes to talk about peace. The stronger position goes to whoever proves they're not broken yet, so the war continues. Bloody, unpredictable, and full of twists, one thing remains certain: Ukraine has shown that it can resist, adapt, and strike the enemy where it is least expected. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a like, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next ones I'm working on. You can support my work through a tip, and if you want to help the video reach more people, click on praise. I appreciate it.